My mother, Catherine, said with a smile. Don't you think you could show some gratitude? Stunned, I was at a loss for words. But, haven't I been sending $2,000 every month for the past 20 years? I thought I'd given back more to you and Dad than my college tuition. Catherine frowned. I've never felt helped by just $2,000. My father, John, nodded slightly as he said, That's right. It's best not to overestimate yourself. I was taken aback and remained silent on the spot. My name is Mary. As a child, I was adventurous, and the local library was my playground. Every day, I sought new worlds and knowledge, reading various books. Thanks to that, I grew up with a strong curiosity, and I got into the habit of researching things I was interested in through books. It had a positive effect on my schoolwork, and I always scored high on tests. However, it seemed that my parents didn't value my efforts and achievements that much. Mary always reads books and seems to be a daydreamer. I still clearly remember my mother's words. I tried my hand at various things out of interest. At my mother's suggestion, I even took swimming and tennis lessons. But it seemed hard for her to determine whether I was genuinely enjoying it or just doing it because I was told. In the end, I was quickly made to quit. I've always loved immersing myself in the world of books, but my mother seemed to wish for a brighter, more active me who played sports. Maybe the version of myself I wanted to be was a bit different. By the time I turned 10, a lovely little sister named Sophie joined our family. Her big eyes had such a charm that just by looking at them, one could melt, and everyone felt from a young age that she'd grow up to be beautiful. Our parents treated Sophie as if she was a treasure, pampering her much more than they did me. Sophie was always cheerful, flashing her radiant smile at everyone, and she truly was a captivating child. No matter how hard I tried, scoring good results in mock exams or getting accepted into a prestigious high school, my parents were more interested in Sophie. For instance, when Sophie scored 70 on an elementary school test, my father joked, "Sophie's a genius, isn't she?" During those times, I felt a bit lonely. However, with a 10-year age gap, I seldom felt envious of her. When I was in high school, she was only 7 or 8 years old. It would be odd to be jealous of such a young child, right? After graduating from high school, I went on to university. I wanted to become a doctor in the future, so I worked incredibly hard. When I returned home, my younger sister, Sophie, would be laughing out loud while watching TV, her laughter echoing throughout the house, which sometimes got on my nerves. Even at midnight, I could hear Sophie giggling or chatting joyfully with her friends on the phone from the next room. Such noises disrupted my concentration. Feeling this way, I thought about starting to live on my own, and consulted my parents. However, they declined, saying, "We don't have the budget for that." And so, the library where I spent time as a child became my place of learning once again. But one day when I turned 22, an unexpected development awaited me. "Mary, you've already graduated from college, haven't you?" "Yes, I certainly have graduated from college." "Why are we still receiving tuition bills?" Despite having informed them that I would be attending medical school after college graduation, it seemed like my parents didn't remember. Or rather than not remembering, they probably hadn't listened carefully to my explanation. When I explained that in order to become a doctor, one needs to study in medical school after college, their faces showed shock. They looked as if they were thinking, "It costs this much for education." After pausing for a moment, they suggested that I drop out of medical school. However, I pleaded, holding back tears, "I'll work part-time to repay the remaining tuition fees. Please let me continue." The life back at my parents' house was often filled with a bit of pressure. My mother would frequently nag, saying things like, "If it weren't for Mary's tuition fees, we could have given Sophie better things." My younger sister, Sophie, once remarked with a pout, "Because of you, I can't buy new clothes or trendy items. What will you do if I can't fit in with my friends anymore?" While bearing her words, I successfully graduated from medical school. Then, I left home to start a new journey as a medical intern. However, the salary for an intern was lower than I expected, making repaying the money much more challenging than I thought. I even considered consulting my parents multiple times about possibly not having enough to repay them. But every month, I scrimped and saved and managed to make payments. One day, when my father said, "Now that you're a doctor, shouldn't you be able to repay a bit more?" I showed him an actual payslip and explained, "This is all I get." Seeing that, he looked a bit surprised but seemed to understand. I saved so much on meals that I started to lose weight rapidly. However, after a few years of hard work, I was able to repay all the tuition fees I owed. By that time, I had finished my residency and fellowship and became a full-fledged internist. My salary increased significantly, and life became much more comfortable. While my primary goal wasn't money, considering the hardships I went through, the salary increase was genuinely a relief. One day, to my surprise, my mother visited the hospital I worked at and discovered that I had become an internist. Not long after, I began receiving endless calls from her. I ignored them several times, but I was worried she might visit the hospital again, so I reluctantly answered. There was a hint of excitement in my mother's voice. "Internists have a good income, right? I can't express how proud I am that you have become so successful." Given her overly enthusiastic tone, I had a feeling she might ask for a favor. And sure enough, in the next moment, she made a significant request. When I heard, "Actually, Sophie is getting married," I couldn't help but exclaim, "Really? She just graduated from college, didn't she?" To add to my surprise, my mother continued, "The truth is, Sophie is pregnant." That's when her real request became clear. She had thought that the wedding expenses wouldn't be too high, but it seemed challenging for Sophie and her partner to have a decent ceremony with their income alone. "So, if it's okay with you, Mary, could you help out?" she asked. I was a bit taken aback by the request. However, considering the situation and thinking of my mother, Sophie, and the family, it might be only natural for me to assist. After all, my parents had supported me throughout my college years. So, I decided to accept the request. My sister and parents were delighted with my help, and it was genuinely a joyful moment. It felt like the first time I truly sensed the warm bond of our family. However, this event would cause a problem later on. A few months after my sister's wedding, I received an unexpected call from my mother. From the tone of her voice, I could tell something serious had happened. My mother was not feeling well and was unable to work. What surprised me even more was that my younger sister was living with her and was so busy taking care of a new member of their family, a little baby, that she couldn't work either. "Our finances are really tight," my mother said. Then, with a tearful voice, she asked, "Could you possibly help us out with about $2,000 a month?" I still vividly remember my mother's voice from that day. Hearing her, I felt how vital I had become to my family. Without thinking, I promised to send the money right away. In retrospect, I might have been consumed by wanting to meet my family's expectations and feeling their love. Eager to deepen the bond, I found myself sending $2,000 every month for years. Once I started sending money, my parents and Sophie's attitudes towards me changed significantly. They invited me home more often, and they also started visiting my place. I was genuinely happy about this change. As time went on, the idea that this was part of being good to my parents settled in the back of my mind, and the monthly transfers became just a routine. 20 years have passed, and the scenery around me has changed quite a bit. Now, as my new family, I have a loving husband and an energetic 12-year-old child who brightens our everyday life. Then one day, I received an unexpected proposal from my parents. "We're getting older, and our legs and back aren't as strong as they used to be," my mother said, lowering her eyes in embarrassment. "How about living together?" my father continued. "They offer to look after my child during the daytime when I'm busy at work. Since my sister moved out, their house seems a bit too quiet, and I could sense loneliness in their voices." "Mary's apartment seems really cozy, doesn't it?" they remarked. After discussing it with my husband and son, both agreed, so we decided to welcome my parents into our home. And then, the moving day arrived. I was truly surprised by the amount of stuff my parents had. "We have many treasures from the past," my mother said with a smile. Amidst this relaxed atmosphere, my sister suddenly appeared. "What are you doing here, Sophie?" Taken aback, I watched as she cheerfully said, "I'm moving in too," and gave a big smile. Seeing Sophie unpacking with such enthusiasm, my eyes widened in astonishment. It seemed that my parents had brought her belongings along as well. Wait, what? Why? What's going on? I asked, slightly perplexed. According to Sophie, her marriage had fallen apart, and she had decided to live on her own. It was then decided that the three of them, parents and daughter, would start new life together, and they chose my upscale apartment for that fresh start. I wish you had consulted with me beforehand, I muttered in slight annoyance. At that, my parents showed sudden anger. My mother's voice rose. Sophie is lonely by herself. Show some compassion. My father added sternly, everything you have in your life now, it's because of the support we gave you. My mother continued, don't you think you could show some gratitude? I retorted, that's why I've been sending $2,000 every month for 20 years. I think that's much more than the total tuition for university and medical school, you know. But my mother's response was cold. Is $2,000 really that big of a deal? My father also chimed in, you're being naive. I was shocked. I can't believe this, I murmured. Then Sophie, with a smile, said, if you don't like it, you don't need to send money anymore. We'll be living here now, so there's nothing to worry about, surprising me even more. Frozen in shock, my husband gently spoke next to me. Considering 3 more people will be living here, it'll undoubtedly get a bit cramped, right? What do you say if we give this house to your parents and we look for a new place? Wait, what do you mean? Well, it'd be pretty awkward to keep living together like this, right? I think it'd be better for both of us to have a fresh start somewhere new. I was still trying to process what my husband was suggesting, but his next words started to make things clearer. Let's transfer the ownership of this condo to your father, so they can live here without any worries. My parents and sisters' faces instantly lit up. We're so grateful. We're truly glad that Mary married such an understanding person. It's heartening to see things progressing so smoothly. We can't believe this lovely condo will be our new home. It feels like a dream. If my husband says so, I'll hand over the condo. Then, we proceeded with discussions with the condo management company and prepared the necessary paperwork. Once you sign these documents, the transfer will be complete, I said, handing them to my father for his signature. After that, we began looking for a new place and eventually moved into a wonderful new home. A few months passed, and one day, I received an unexpected call from my parents. Why are we getting a monthly rent bill? An angry voice, clearly my father's, echoed from the other end of the line. I replied, a bit coldly, albeit surprised, well, isn't it obvious that you'd have to pay if you're living in a house? No, that's not the point. Didn't you and your husband buy this condo? Well, the thing is, it was actually a rental. What? Why didn't you mention something so important before? Well, you never really asked. Cut it out. The rent is $3,000, right? Just pay it, and there's no problem. There's no way we can afford that every month. My husband and I wouldn't have had a problem with that amount. How about this? Would you consider letting us live with you again? You've been using us all this time. Why do you believe we could live peacefully together? I'm sorry, I truly am. But please help us. We can't pay the rent, and things are getting difficult. Could you possibly help us out with $2,000 a month like before? I'm sorry, but I don't want to be involved with you anymore. Let's end our relationship as parent and child here. Wait, please. Let's talk. Before I hung up, I could hear the voices of my mother and sister in the background, full of shock and panic. Their voices conveyed just how desperate they were. I couldn't help but smile to myself. My parents and sister might have been expecting delightful and comfortable days in the new house. They probably dreamed of a life like in the movies, filled with brand-name furniture and the latest electronics. But reality wasn't so sweet. Due to excessive spending on hobby items and trendy clothes, the rent became burdensome, and it seemed like my father's savings dwindled rapidly. As a result, they had to leave their apartment and move to a more affordable one. The expensive furniture and appliances they had splurged on didn't fit in their new home, resulting in a huge loss as they had to let them go. Furthermore, there were endless disputes within the family about whose fault it was that they ended up in this situation. Days filled with each pointing fingers, saying, "It's your fault." I can't help but think about how self-centered they are. As for my husband, our son, and me, we first moved to a rental apartment and later fulfilled our dream of building our own house. That apartment held a special place in our hearts as it was where our life as a family of 3 began. It had tremendous value as a stepping stone before building our new home. My husband is incredibly hardworking and holds a managerial position at a major company. This means we have a stable income, and our combined annual salary is quite significant. With such a background, we were able to get a dreamlike, wonderful home. Because of my poor judgment this time, I really put my husband and our son in a tough situation. That's why I contributed the majority of the funds when we built our new home. After all the trouble I caused them, I felt it was the least I could do. I met my husband during the period when I was financially supporting my parents and sister. At that time, my parents and sister were very friendly towards me, and I believe my husband felt we were a close-knit family. However, he quickly saw through their seemingly friendly demeanor and understood their underlying motives. I was truly amazed by his insight. He accepts every part of me, and I find great strength in that. That's why I genuinely want to cherish my husband and son more in the future. The money I used to spend on my parents, I now want to use wisely for the benefit of my husband and our son.